Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this workshop on meaningful metrics. So what our panelists are hoping to do with this workshop is introduce you to a new framework for defining and implementing performance metrics. So through the focus on a new research-informed approach to evaluation methods in the social sciences, they will present attendees with the knowledge and tools needed to adapt current and develop new processes for measuring and evaluating the impact of your work in this field. So my name's Gülda, I'll be the chair today, and I'm the Partnerships Manager in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of York. And beside me, we have Dr. Valeria Ramirez, who is Research Associate at UCI at the University of Cambridge. We have Arnie King, who is the Community of Practice Coordinator for Praxis Oral. And we have Professor Jenny Shawley, who is the Professor of Engagement and Academic Director for the Centre for Enterprise at Manchester Metropolitan University. Just before I hand over, I'd just like to make you all aware that on your tables there is an initial survey that we'd like you all to have a look at and complete over the course of this workshop. And I will now hand over to Valeria to begin the session.
Thank you, Gul. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining the workshop today, particularly in the last day after lunch and everything. So thank you for being here. And well, as you know, many universities and stakeholders are investing more in social sciences, arts, and humanities. They are doing this because it is valuable. We all know that. But due to its particular characteristics, it is difficult to capture that value in metrics. As a result of this, these positive effects that we all here are aware are not always visible at a system level. So this lack of visibility, unfortunately, creates sometimes tensions when it comes to resource allocation, because without data, it's difficult to justify spending and to decide what is actually the best way to distribute these very much reducing or limiting resources that we might face, or the new circumstances that we might be into. So today we'd like to propose new alternative ways to best capture this value. And we'd like to invite you to think of how support systems can help academics and partners to reflect this value meaningfully in a way that enables inclusive performance metrics and that leads the way towards the change that all stakeholders of knowledge exchange, including beneficiaries, want to see. And with this in mind, I will hand over to Arnie. Special effects.
Was very dramatic. 5 minutes. Hi everyone, my name's Arnie and I'm here to help, but also here representing the community of practice that's supported by VSRC and run through Praxis Oral. So this community of practice is for TCOs, commercialisation officers, KE staff, or professional services that focus on two sort of strands of arts, science, social science commercialisation, but social venture building and social impact creation, which is obviously a huge overlap, and the metric systems are a massive, definitely in the centre of that Venn diagram. So we've been funded for a year now, so my first couple of weeks in the job about a year ago was conference last year in Nottingham, which was absolutely fantastic to see the engagement that already existed amongst the community in these conversations, and we want for it. But as a marker of how this year has gone, to start seeing a whole dedicated track in these conversations, both in the disciplines, the sort of impact focus of the commercialisation, and the metrics conversation itself, which is obviously so huge, has been fantastic. So what the sort of main things to remember for the community of practice are the three aims being to sort of define that sector change, so that's best practice. We'll shout out case studies in different formats, different sort of platforms, and then have a conversation about that. How does that apply to your university? So there's been online meets and in-person meets. We'll continue that next year, and metrics has been a huge one. In that, the sort of outside support, which is relevant stuff here in the metrics, is looking at the third sector that exists already. How do impact ventures or different organisations that are based around what you would think of as the arts, science, and social science, how do they start saying that money's been spent in the correct way and people are sort of being impacted in the right way, which is a great conversation to start bringing into this TTO process. And then that wider sort of sector cultural change, then how do our jobs look different in the next few years outside of a different policy or practice and things like that. So the community of practice, if you've not heard of it already, which hopefully quite a few of you have, I do recognise you all from the last couple of days anyway, we'll continue for a little while now, where we'll definitely have metrics as an ongoing conversation. So if you want to get involved in just hearing case studies, suggesting case studies, even hypothetical ones and things like that, then this is what it's all about. It's the community around these conversations and how do we then build from that so that people's jobs and the cultural change reflects that. Just super quickly, because we've obviously got fantastic speakers here to talk about some of the granular processes involved in getting the evidence for a robust metric system, and some of the conversations across the last few days have already covered this fantastically. Just some of the conversations that have come up within the community so far that I think are relevant here mainly fall into sort of three areas. One would be the engagement of academics in the first instance. So if you're using language that is in the right sort of categories, the right themes and things like this, then absolutely tied to metrics, that's really, really important. They'll understand that it's worthwhile if it's related to something that they've heard of and is impactful and where they want to be sort of seeing their career go. But also then rewarding academics, because even if there's an entrepreneurial mindset or an impactful mindset within an academic, making it worthwhile their time, if they even have that time, is really, really important to start making sure that it's clear to them where it's going or how it will be sort of rewarded in that way. But then also catching things that are already happening in that academic's career has been really interesting. So we've had lots of conversations, people saying they're aware of academics doing stuff in this realm that we would really like the universities to shout about and reward and things like this, but there's just not a system in place to start putting that through the institution in the right way, or it then is sort of a negative process for the academic to do that. So to make sure then that things that are already happening then get in a positive, organic way, get collected, celebrated, and then start to feed back into the academic career, then that's really, really important here. The sort of conversation we'll want then moving forward, or the defining the sector change kind of things we'll look at, are sessions like this, exactly what the kind of things we want to spotlight, of what does it actually look like, what are the questions, what are the numbers, what are the categories and themes and things like that. How does it link with other initiatives that are maybe relevant to the academic and they've can see changing over the next few years? There's a couple of big ones that I think we can all imagine there. One really interesting sort of idea that has come up in the community is that there's a sort of commercialization threshold. So there's almost two-factor aspect to it of here's a few key things they have to hit to have said, yes, we are making sure it's worthwhile, covering itself, really robust thing, and then it starts to look at impact and becomes more qualitative so that both sides of the sort of robust needs of the institution and the academic are touched. But then as what came up in the bigger sessions yesterday is a really interesting thing to have already heard in the community of practice is that wider context. So as universities change, start looking towards being an institution of social good, attaching to grand challenges, those sort of global narrative kind of things, collaboration. How do these metrics support that? But then how do the relationships with people outside of universities develop in the right way? How do they understand what we're doing and how the academics work can feed into it have all been related to this metrics conversation. So as I said, there's the QR code just to make sure you've joined, but everyone here will get lots of emails about the community practice anyway if you're here at the session. So really looking forward to the presentation themselves to get more granular, and I'll be running around to help with all the conversations and stuff. So thanks very much, Valeria. And
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arne. That is great. Yeah, very much worth your time. So yes, thank you very much. And I am going to share a research today, which this research was the answer to the question: what are the right digital KPI to measure the efficacy of communication campaigns? So this was my 4-year research question, or maybe more, almost like a life in some past professional life. Because the fact is that this was a burning question among PR professionals who struggle with legitimacy. They used to showcase beautiful examples of their press cuttings as evidence of their value, and also arguing that their craft cannot be measured or not put into numbers. But times change, and particularly the digital transformation arrived, and demands for accountability increased. Greater investments in digital communication meant also greater availability of digital metrics. So from web traffic to views or followers, the right metric was the saint grail that ignited conversations and very much brought confusion for a lot of this professional segment. But this was not the case of absolutely everyone. There was a group of expert measurers that did actually very well. They not only earned recognition during this time, but also paved the way for best measurement practices. They actually grew from six organizations members in UK to 200 organizations in 33 countries, only in 3 years. So that was very much my question to say how this group of elite measurers actually came to this success and to this reference of metrics frameworks standards as being actually an international reference on the right way to metric and to have KPIs. It's like, how did they do it? So I went into this field work and studying their groups, their history, their members, their 20 years of existence since 1996. And this is what I found. So I found that all of this follow a set of grammar rules for meaningful metrics and avoid the pitfalls of meaningless metrics. So this is a very broad frame done just to remember, so to represent. So it was the 4 rules of purpose, contextuality, causality, and robustness and transparency. So, for example, neglecting the rule of purpose resulted in vanity metrics. Irrelevant KPIs are due to the lack of an holistic approach, so for the lack of context. For them also, they also realized that showing the causality links between metrics were key for them to actually demonstrate value. And in order to achieve all of this, they were needing to have a proficiency on reliable measurement devices. So that all of these aspects were key. So this was very interesting in the field work. The question then was, okay, but how? So how did they do it? And so there was this for, and it was not all a smooth journey. Of course, they have also some hurdles, some obstacles to face. And so some of the obstacles they had to face was. For example, obstacles was the idea of creating a measurement convention. So this creating measurement convention is really key. This is creating the space for nurturing relationships of trust between their stakeholders. But there were also other strategies that this elite of experts implemented to overcome these obstacles, as we see here. So there was the creative measurement conventions, and there was, for example, the learning from failures too. There was the idea of keeping a techno-balance, because there was also this technological wave and constant changing. So they were needing to keep a balance between the technological changing and also the relationships, which very much reminds some of the STEM I-shaped conversations that we have been listening recently. And they need to allocate resources for the actual measuring process and to establishing ethical boundaries into the whole measurement process itself. So as you see, it was not as much as, well, we decide metrics. These are the metrics. This is the silver bullet KPI that we're gonna use. So it was a fostering process between all the expert measurers and the different clients, that they could have. But so the question here, as was, well, this was the fieldwork. This was the results, and for them, the most important thing that they have to go through, or they were put in the middle of the table every time, every single person that I identified were about the connection and having the spaces to actually explain, restitute, and create and talk and understand the needs of the different groups that were having at stake into this, the whole complex process that was the communication and the communication outcome. So this measurement convention was the space to include stakeholders and to foster understanding around KPIs. So this meant agreeing in how and what had to be measured. And during this process, they were able to actually apply the grammar rules for meaningful metrics and avoid the pitfalls of the meaningless metrics. So this was the space where everything happened. So the question is like, well, they were doing that naturally. It was just part of their everyday commitment to their job. But the question then, the question that I wanted to take further is, how can we reproduce that in other settings? This was a group of expert measurers, but how can we actually reproduce this spirit of meaningful metrics in other areas, also in communication? So I commercialized my research, and I work with a French agency. So this is the applied case. So I commercialized my research, and I work with a French agency for ecological transition. They are a communication department of 16 people. They manage an annual budget of 33 million and dozens of partnerships who span largely from topics such as business to business, energy efficiency, to recycling, fast fashion among young audiences. So for this, they have several partnerships implemented, and they needed to have a better understanding on how actually allocate these resources of this 26 million of resources every year among the different partnerships that could go between events, workshops, communication campaigns in television, radio, podcasts, community activities were very much important too. So it was, how can we come with a unify or a standardized way that we can, where we can assess just this diversity of partnerships with different objectives, with different communities, but that can give us an understanding of the overall budget that we are needing to allocate, and that this can be distributed in a fair way for the beneficiaries, for the stakeholders, for the partners that we are engaging with. And so this is what we came up with. So the meaningful metrics. So this is the way we do it. And you all have in your tables an individual copy of this one. So I am aware that the letters are very small here, but they are, well, this is the process that we follow. We started at the very end of the page by identifying the stakeholders. So this is very important. So the identification of the stakeholders was key. This is the most important part, because advocating for social value, we need actually to consider who makes this group. What is the social value of what is the social structure that we are reflecting of? What is the social structure that we are wanting to act upon? So that was the question that we were needing to ask. Who belongs to this social realm? So then we need to further agree with these stakeholders, with these representatives that can be 4 or 6 people, that is to decide this. We need to agree further agree into what needs to be changed and into the visible evidence for this. So this is when our initial metric gets to be proposed. This is the purple area. So this is the convention. This is the part where all the stakeholders participate. And then once a first metric has been proposed, we go through the different lines of the framework. So we will test this metric towards the purpose, the idea of the purpose, the contextuality, the causality, and the robustness of transparency. The idea is that the measurement device cannot be a black box for the stakeholders. It needs to be clearly understood. And during this process, this fostering of understanding and trust gets to happen. This all got to be formalized at the end by the negotiation of agreement. So this was an agreement formalized in a pre-settled goals agreement, which is very much in the bottom line. So this included 6 elements: the strategic goal, a quantified objective, a contextual reference, a period of reference, a measurement device, and a metric unit. So this process encourages real engagement from stakeholders, provides a common ground for understanding, and enables milestone tracking to take the project also further. So this is a little bit how it looked like. So in this case, again, I'm not asking to go and read into each of the parts, but this was the equivalence between the purpose and the 4 rules: purpose, contextuality, causality, robustness, and transparency. And actually, these criteria that I am mentioning, so for each of the strategic goals, we have a goal and a destination, a quantifiable objective, a contextual reference for the starting point, which is a baseline, a period of reference, the measurement device of digital KPI, so in this case, and a KPI, so the actual metric that it was going to be. So we're going to have more dive of this and more adapted later with the case of Professor Shirley. But just to illustrate the overall process, of course, this is a simplified version, but we went into defining together a list of KPIs, a tailored logic model in order to adapt. For example, they were very care of sustainable and responsible communication. That was included too. And we ended up with a partnership pre-settled goals agreement, which actually included all these 6 elements, categories that they were very specific for their specific needs, And at the end, it was the reflection of their goals, the quantified goals, and the percentage of goals achievement. So at the end of the day, they knew that if the goals that were pre-established were achieved at 50, 60, 70%. And something that enables this method is like to sit back at the end and not to see it as failure, because it's just like, okay, what happened? So, and it's an iterative process. It's like we are talking with stakeholders, we are understanding what happened, and we are taking this further. So there is no such idea of failure. It's always into this iteration. And so finally, when is best to use this meaningful metrics method? So this is most useful when KPI and measurement tools are not clearly defined, when stakeholders' involvement is desired and social value is a key outcome. It is also ideal to foster long-term trustful partnerships and a culture of continuous improvement. And with this, I will pass on to Professor Shirley, who will talk us to the model into his case.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Valeria. Okay. Hi. I'm Jenny Shawley from Manchester Met, and I should say that my relationship with Valeria started for her interviewing me for this project about the kind of metrics that we use. And I'm going to take a few minutes just to talk you through a little and very quick example. I'm sure you'll all agree that you've seen the robustness behind this, and it's absolutely incredible. But there is a way of doing this in a really kind of quick in a quick way. So I just wanted to mention, first of all, my context. So I am the academic director of something called the Centre for Enterprise at Manchester Met. Now, we exist to support small firms and entrepreneurs to innovate and grow. So we have a 30-strong team of professional services and academic colleagues, and we all work together as a seamless team. And we've done an enormous amount of funded projects, as we would think it's an enormous amount over the past few years. So we've supported around 2,500 small firms to create 500 jobs, etc., etc. We've got some big numbers there for our centre, and we're really proud of that. However, the world is changing. A lot of this was under European Regional Development Fund money, which was high volume and a lot of work. I'll come back to that in a second. But this is who we are, and we've also been looking, I've been in post less than a year, and we've been looking specifically at how we think we are different to other deliverers. And it's absolutely come up over the past 2 days, we deal with a lot of science-based innovation projects. So one of our largest projects is called the Centre for Digital Innovation, and it's about supporting small firms to innovate. But for us, we are leading it from the business school, from the Centre for Enterprise. Innovation is about so much more than the technology. It's about diffusion and adoption, but it's also about leadership and change management. And that's the approach that we take. And it's absolutely filtering through some of the funders, but still a lot of the time people think that innovation just equals tech, and it absolutely doesn't. That's what we live by. And our other strand is our leadership work, which is based on strategic space and social capital development, which a lot of other areas are as well, with net zero and digital embedded in everything we do. So that's just a little bit about who we are. So we have challenges. So we are pivoting from a high volume funding stream with particular types of staff and particular type of work to a more diverse portfolio of work. So we have some ESRC funding, we have Innovate UK, we've got lots of different areas, but it's no longer, and for those of you who know ERDF, this kind of big juggernaut of funding, and we're having to pivot, and it's important to do. But also part of that is communicating what we do and how we do it. So we're obviously turning money, funding, into knowledge, and then that knowledge back into money for small firms. But how are we really talking about that? In order to get more funding and change our diverse portfolio is really important to us. And also we really want to influence policy and funders to understand the importance of leadership and management. Soft skills is a terrible term, but I'll say it because people understand what it is. Soft skills in the development of innovation. So those are our challenges. And that kind of led us to do a bit of double loop learning, which I'm sure everybody kind of already knows about. But it really helps me to think about these things sometimes. So we took kind of what we do, our idea, we support small firms, and we want some results. ERDF was absolutely great in the fact that it makes you look at jobs that are created, it makes you look at new products, services, etc. It was really useful for that. And obviously we take action to be able to do that, and that's doing things right. But we're also making quite a lot of assumptions about how those small firms needed to grow, about the fact that UK policy was correct for small firms, that the focus on job creation was the right method of growth for people to kind of look at. And so then we started thinking, well, actually we need to go back to think about what kind of results we actually really need from this work, and whether or not we actually want to influence the methods of growth, taking what we've learned from these large amount of small firms that we work with every day, that we talk to every day, and actually feeding that back in. So that was a kind of key thing for us. And so this led us to metrics. Obviously, we all have to engage with metrics on different levels, particularly with funders, and obviously Valeria's already alluded to that. But to go back again to this question of why are we really doing what we're doing? Are we just chasing these metrics because that's what gets us the money and that's what gets us the next pot of money, and how does that work? So what metrics really show the importance of what we do? So the real change that's made, and we also want to change and influence from that change as well. So this has kind of led us to this exercise. And what I should say is, I did this really quickly. This is a kind of example of something that we want to focus on in terms of small company policy, small firm policy in the UK. And I wanted to use it to show that you can do this really quickly, but I think it's a really rich exercise to do. So I've taken the framework and basically kind of inputted what we want to do within it, which is influence SME policy in the UK. So we start off with our stakeholders, as we said, hugely important to have those people in the room, and I'll come back to those later. Of policymakers, university and small firms at this point. As I say, this was very quick and dirty, but I think it can work really well like that. And our purpose is to change SME policy. And actually, how do we know that we have changed SME policy? Well, you have to be cited. And for anybody that's done ref impact case studies that are focused on policy, that's such a challenge to be able to get quite a lot of the time. But we really wanted to get towards that, to know that we're making a difference. And then we looked at particular measurement devices that would help us do that. So citations, policy groups, roundtables, etc. So being named as part of that group was great. And we'll come on to the baseline, etc. after that. And then in terms of the contextuality, the causality, I won't go through each of these, or I'm dead happy to chat to people afterwards if people are interested in that. But what it's really helped us to do with this is just really focus on actually what it is that we want to change, and to do that with those stakeholders. So actually this is a really easy thing to take into a meeting that you're having, to take into a session that we're doing with small firms, and just saying, does this make a difference to you? What is it that you actually need to know, and what would actually mean something to you? And then obviously we come back after we've got through the robustness and transparency. So that's very much about our process, down to kind of making a change. And I'll come on to that just now. But I would just say it's really, really useful to look at that and to just ask yourself, those questions for loads of different reasons, but mostly because it really stimulates an important conversation with your stakeholders. And so this is our form of that tool in use. So our first example, we've been incredibly specific here, is improving national policy influence, and we'll do that by citations. So this can feel like quite a kind of cold metric in a way, but if you take it back to that goals agreement, actually it's not a cold metric at all. It's just an example of something where we can really show change. And so something that seems very quantitative actually is really born from qualitative, kind of important, deep work. And so we'll do that by 20% annually. As I say, this is a bit of a thought experiment. This isn't actually what we're doing, but it's an experiment. And average number we have is 10 citations a year, and we're looking for 12 by the end of the first year. And does everybody know Overton? Yeah, so it's, for anybody who doesn't know Overton, it's so useful if you're looking to see how you're cited in policy, and it's really easy to use, so it's an absolute boon. And so our KPI there is number of citations. So you'll see this is really straightforward, common sense sort of stuff. But it's not really what's written down there that's important. It's the conversation that you have with those people that you're working with that's really important with it. So our convening power, for example, is about holding roundtables with policymakers. And we look at how many we've had during the past 5 years, so say none. And then we plan out from there, and we look at attendance, we look at policymakers in attendance with that, with some policy feedback. And these three really short examples are supposed to work together as well, as part of that whole. As part of this, it's not just one of those goals. Everything has to work together, and particularly in discussion with the stakeholders. So that was a super quick way of being able to use this tool really practically in this framework. And I have learned from it several things. That questioning what we do is, of course, very useful, but it is actually really hard to do. It is to ask yourself those questions of why is it that I'm in this at all, particularly when you're in a specific funding round, when you're in the kind of grip of funding that has to keep turning that handle. You have to keep obviously employing all the staff that you're employing, but actually going back and thinking about why you're doing what you're doing is really important. It's that left-hand side of the framework is really important. And lofty ambitions, we want to change some policy in the UK. Well, they need practical action, and they need quite specific, sometimes seeming quite pedestrian ways to start off getting there, actually. That's how you do it. You eat the elephant a bit at a time, don't you? And that's what you have to do. I'm hoping other people know that phrase, so that sounds really odd if you don't know it. But anyway. And also, we all talk about stakeholders a lot. I talk about stakeholders a lot. But really considering their views at the beginning and not just asking them whether or not they think what you're doing is a good idea. Really honestly having a proper conversation with them and setting out what you want to get at the end is really important. And lastly, undergoing this process can really help you work out what you are that is different, what you can do, the change that you can make, so it can really help in your value proposition as well. So that was a super quick canter through the way that we could use this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. That was a really wonderful example and transposition to the exercise in terms that are very, very much relatable to all of you. And they're very much relatable because I am sure too that this process, this idea is familiar to many of you who have been involved in KPI setting. Now, this process focus very much in the formalizing of the thinking on the KPIs, as I said, to discuss. And I would like, for this, we will like we will ask you and invite you to actually do a little bit of the piece of work with us into reflecting and thinking of all of these past experiences. And so the past experiences that you have experienced, that you have faced, or how you have own in projects, in other settings, implemented your own set of meaningful metrics in a way. So let's assume that you have already engaged with the stakeholders, and I will invite you to reflect on this in pairs. You will have in your tables, there's on the tables A3 sheet with this. So it could be, I could value if you discuss how the meaningful metrics or these metrics of this process has been already applied by your team. So if you could work in pairs with this A3 sheet that it is on the table. So it is something like, Yes. Yeah, so it's the A tree, so it's the one that looks like this. And so think of your examples, and it's breaking down the process of what is the KPI, what is the strategic objective. And so let's give 15 minutes for this. And please, if you haven't filled in the diagnostic survey from the beginning, I'd really appreciate if you could do it. Now we're going to collect it now because it's paired with a final survey too.
Hi, everybody. There's just less than 5 minutes left on this section.
Just to answer a question that I was asked previously, and think that it will be helpful for many to hear. What I meant by the measurement device is can be actually anything from a software to a spreadsheet. So it's what are you using actually? What are you agreeing on to use to measure the thing? And then the KPI is the actual metric. So we have a ruler and we have a centimeter. We have an overturn and we have the number of policy mentions. So it is something that comes together most of the times or instinctively, but the process of the thinking process of dissociating it helps to actually discuss this around the table with the stakeholders and to have better clarity, and mostly to avoid the effect of the black box effect. So we really go into inquiring on this measurement device. How is it built? Is it working? Is it going to be robust? Is it going to give us what we need in the long term? So this is the goal of having these two different aspects.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice idea. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that sounds good. I tried to take one at Valeria speaking when I was sitting there. She was speaking if I sit that way, which is the empty room. So it would have been better off standing over there. That's why I removed my laptop. She probably doesn't want her own. I do want to take this for myself, because I'm going to start using it. That's what I'm going to take one too. I think I'm going to share it.
Okay, so now let's move to the second part of the workshop, as of the work in tables together. And for this, we could like to explore how can this actually be recreated at a system level. We've seen the experience with the own projects and thinking individually in each project. Now, the question now that we would like to ask you is how can we actually scale up this? And so for this, in your tables, there is a A0 page in the table. So you have two questions. There are different questions for it, but the first question is the same in every case. Is how could you scale up this process to create a standard measurement approach at a university level? So is it that, for example, within your departments, is it that by developing your own tailored pre-settled goals agreement? Is it by having a training or having a person within the department that is going to be your measurement champion, that is going to have a specific training on these matters and try to ease the pathway for for the rest of the colleagues, or for all the projects. How are you already doing something that looks like that, or that have these resources? So how could that look like eventually? And so, as I said, for the second question, we have two different topics. So one side has been looking at how to choose the stakeholders. Who do we want to sit in the table? Do we want someone from the university leadership, someone support systems, the academic team, the beneficiaries, the funders? Who would be the ideal set of stakeholders that will be relevant for you to actually agree in this in the metrics to take further and to have the best meaning of the best outcomes of these metrics? And the other question is about how can we ensure that at system level we can get to meaningful metrics. Maybe if there is any other pathway that you can come up with, or any suggestions, well, that's the time. And so let's say 10 minutes for this, and then the brief and hear your thoughts about all of this. Thank you.
Well, no, it's because they're challenging questions, aren't they? They're not, which is good. That's what people want. But yeah, they will go a bit quiet, I reckon. Yeah.
Table the group that's sort of directed 3 directed away, 9 club. 2 of them like, oh, it's triggering a question over pictures. That's exactly it, just what you think you guys are putting in, what you'd like to see is the conversation longer. It's just a conversation we've had for years and years and years. What we need is really people in the community to get them to talk about KPIs.
Maybe a community practice?
Not community practice, but your project is specific on things. Just in a slide about how stakeholders have that conversation.
Oh, I think you told me about those. Are these your feedback surveys? Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think the feedback could be really useful, because I think with this, the only thing I think is I think it's thrown up a lot of really important questions, but I'm not sure if people have answered all their questions. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not sure that they're going to be much more confident, just because I think they're still in the middle of discussing it and working it out. Yeah, yeah. 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 That sounds good. Have you had people just constantly coming up and asking you ridiculous questions?
Not too ridiculous, actually.
They've been really good, haven't they? Especially with all the miking up and everything. It's not easy to do with this kind of thing.
Oh, I shall tell you.
Oh, she's
From
don't
us.
give him a thumbs up.
Don't give me a thumbs down. I did have a funny question yesterday. Obviously, we let everyone hand in their coats as they came in. We all got more coats around upstairs. Someone came in and said, someone must have taken my coat. Why? It's not where I left it. No one says.
They did notice that none of the other guys were also there.
Is it actually? Yes.
Do you know what I saw today? Yvonne from Strathclyde. I swear did not have her arm in a sling yesterday. And Yvonne from Strathclyde. And I just saw her this morning and she just walked past me and I was like, there's something happened. Well, yeah, it's Blackpool, isn't it? Who knows whatever could have happened. I was like, I hope she's alright. Yeah, I phoned my nana last night when we were in the gala dinner, and I went right up to the top. I just took the stairs to feed on my client. I said, right, so you could have an injury there. It looked very beautiful though from the top. So lovely. Oh no, I think that's a good place. I think that's the Tower Ballroom. I think there are two. Yeah. Yeah. No, it does because I initially had that thought, and then I was like, no, they have it in the Tower Ballroom in Strictly. And then I was talking to somebody on the table about it, and they said, yeah, they have to use Google Translate. Obviously, so much that's been well, especially the audience. Like if they put the people around here, so it's happy. Yeah. So there you go.
How was the witch? Yes, please. Thank you. So we are approaching the end of the workshop. Well, I'm glad to see that this has ignited some conversations and thoughts. Thank you. Thomas. Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to see that this has ignited live conversations around. I hope that the conversations that you're having, you are finding them useful. That this is bringing new ideas. So, as we wrap up, I would like to share this idea, your feedback, and invite maybe one participant of the table or two to share ideas, thoughts, and the conversation. So maybe shall we start by this way? So the first on the left. Maybe if we could have some.
I'll have a go.
Thank you very much. The first one is always the most difficult, so very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, between us actually, truthfully, I think we struggled a bit with this. Not because we didn't see the value in it, but how it plugs into what we do. So that's a good challenge. So I think one of the things we were landing on is that kind of peer-to-peer perspective and almost kind of case studies, because actually so much of this work is in quite early stages. A lot of us don't have really solid case studies that aren't based on something really exceptional. Like, I'm sure many of us have come across, COVID happened, and so therefore this thing, let's hope we never have that again. But it kind of doesn't make for a great case study, actually. So can we identify some almost slightly more safe, bit more maybe boring case studies where nothing exceptional happened, but it worked, and it demonstrates that this can work, and that they're comfortable in their own skin to share that and don't feel that it needs to be a big PR piece or that they're being really radical, but just really quite straightforward. And yeah, so we kind of landed on that a little bit. And then I guess the other challenge we had with this was a lot of the changes that we're looking at in arts, humanities, social sciences, as you all know, might be more along the 5, 10, 15 years kind of change trajectory. And I think this framework, we were all saying, kind of, it underscores that to answer these questions, it might take 5, 10 years to even have an answer. And so if what we're saying is this is a good methodology, in order to answer those questions, we're just going to have to wait 5 or 10 years for the actual answers. So it kind of underscores the need to systematically review the way that we capture evidence.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that is a great thing in the mindset shift of social sciences in general, and actually what do we want to see? And there's not enough time to go through all the things, the experience that I had in the communications realm. So once the communication professionals saying that, but this is new, we've never done that, we don't know a baseline. It's not a problem. Start with one number. We trust you. Just give your best guess, because it is not going to be about that number, the failure or not. It's just you're going to test that, and then you're going to have milestones of 1 month, 3 months, shorter milestones on what you are just checking the direction, because you don't want to wait 5 years to see that actually everything went wrong. So you want to have intermediary milestones that can show that you are actually following the good way, and identifying these milestones that can be in the realm of activities, that can be in the realm of engaging with 3 persons, with 3 people, engaging with one policy making. That can be a valuable thing for the stakeholders involved, but at the same time, again, that is valuable for you. So that might be very valuable to give a first sheet or first baggage of information. So yeah, not going to extend more, but maybe more comments for here.
This table like to comment?
Then I shall go for it. Thank you. We also struggled a little bit, I think, but we had a very good conversation about setting the kind of priority, the goal, and relating that to a metric. I think some goals may be too long term or slightly, I think, too abstract to really measure them. But then the question is, okay, do you just set the metric, change your goal, lower the purpose? Is that good practice? So it's a question back to you, and if anyone wants to share anything else.
Yeah. I think part of the discussion that we had as well was around metrics, and perhaps, as soon as you start potentially measuring a KPI, it's maybe not a useful KPI anymore if someone's using that as a target rather than a metric. So just being aware of that, we had a discussion around, say, if you're doing business development, perhaps that you need to have 20 meetings, great. But if all of a sudden someone's saying, I'm having 40 meetings, well, are you really amazing at your job, or have you just wasting time? So a bit of conversation around that as well.
Yes, to answer to the questions, first I start for the last point. I agree that reluctance to metrics and to measurement is something existing really in the social sciences realm, because when social sciences, art and humanities, very much because it's I identify very much a part of the community, but it's very much about the relationship, the thinking, the qualitative, the things and that can't take very much long. That is the point. So the gaming of the metrics is one of the effects. So just my background is sociology of quantification, and so this kind of effects as gaming metrics, the effects of rankings, all the unintended effects of metrics are a real thing. So what we are trying to do here today and thinking through is like, okay, we need those metrics, we need this abstract thinking in somehow to restitute, to give visibility to activities that outside of this room are not necessarily being seen or valued all the time. So it's kind of, well, what is the best possible way that we could come to something that will make sense? And that is why the participants of this convention, the measurement convention, are going to be that relevant, because it's what is important for the stakeholders. And that at the end, well, this is very much the difference also, or one of the differences between the research and the publishing. The knowledge exchange is about creating the change, or having the direct impact. And yeah, if some cases, what might be there are long-term partnerships that that last 5 years, but I imagine that there is done some idea of desire to start seeing the changes, and to start this abstract thinking earlier helps the way to where am I going. So this is not all. I'm very much aware that we need this qualitative aspect of it, and we need to stop by, and we need to think, and we need to be careful about not making it all about the metrics. It's just, this is a part that we are asked to, and certainly when it comes to resource allocation, funds allocation at the system level. So in many cases, we don't have a choice but to come with the best answer that we can possibly give. Can I jump?
Does anybody from this table like to talk?
Thomas.
Spoken far too much at this conference. You must be sick of my voice. Yeah, I think we all, again, I think our table was a mix of funders and a couple from universities. So we had a slightly broader range, a broader discussion, I guess. And some of it came down to actually, do we really understand the breadth of activities that fall in this space? And the answer is no. And certainly when you get outside your local, obviously each of you as individuals knows what's happening in your institution. But I think once you get up to the people like myself that are trying to advise on metrics, and our team, or you get to the funders, I don't think we really understand the variety of things happening. And absent of that, it's very hard to try and understand how you might start valuing things. So some great examples came up in both the institutions that are represented on our table around students providing pro bono services, legal services. Right? There are almost certainly ways to value that, to place a monetary value on that. Right? There are methods in economics, for example, which look at shadow pricing to do that. And you can do that for different types of things. The challenge is that that's, again, talking about the scaling of this up to a national level, I think the question is the burden of that could be incredibly high. So you have to try and find ways of doing this and trying to capture the insights and the kind of the effects without killing the people in the room that have to collect the data, right? So I think something about just really understanding the variety of things happening and what are the patterns, what are the common themes would be really helpful. The other thing that came up was, again, speaks something that I think this table behind us, behind me, talks about, which is the importance of, say, behavior change. Right? So a lot of the activities, even just engaging with academics, can change their approaches, their perceptions of what happens, so they can start thinking more about what the options are. So then you get into the question about how do you set a right metric on that? If you just count the number of meetings, you're going to have more meetings, right? So you have to find a way of having some quality weight on that. But again, locally, you'll probably understand whether you can see your colleague having twice as many meetings, well, actually, are they achieving anything? If you're starting to have to report to a national metric system, or some kind of higher up level metric system, forget whether it's national or not, those people won't know, so they'll just look at the number of meetings. That can create these weird behaviors in the system. I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, the scale up of the thinking, I think that is definitely a key. Shall we go to this way?
Would anybody like to contribute from this table? Yeah.
I agree, or yes, our little
So
agree.
we all
Our
agree.
little agree. Yeah, we vaguely agree. With the first two tables, really, this exercise is quite hard if you have a zero starting point, and we don't have a data specialist. Certainly, from my point of view, I don't really understand the language. I don't think that the people I'd need to engage with would understand the language used in this exercise. So, a framework is useful, but I think it has to be relevant to the discipline and the kind of stakeholders that you're talking to. And if you don't know what the KPI is or the goal, when you're starting off, it's quite hard. And I think that could be said for a lot of and I'm not talking about social sciences, I'm talking about arts and particularly performing arts here. And we're not completely fluffy. We do some really hardcore stuff, but then proving it in a meaningful way that isn't the number of meetings, or that you're writing a 5,000 word essay on what you're doing either. So some kind of middle ground on that would be great. But certainly first thoughts are this language is meaningless in our context, but not what you're trying to do, it's the terminology is very difficult to get a head round.
Thank you very much. That is very valuable of feedback. What is the idea of the purpose and the robustness? Is that
So the purpose is good. We do need something, but it needs to be in a way that we feel that we can manage it, and in language that actually means something to us and to our stakeholders.
Yeah, definitely. This is a very quick snapshot. I agree that this exercise needs to be tailored to each of the needs. And to go back to what Thomas was saying, also, what are the metrics that reflect something? Is in the case of arts, for example, is it behavior change? It is inciting on one thing, kind of thinking. How am I going to realize that that exhibition, for example, change the mindset of something that I wanted to do towards what? So I think that is a very delicate thing to go into, which of course I couldn't go at all, and is one of the stakeholders' discussion to have. Like, well, what is the goal of this exhibition? What do we want to change? A behavior changing, an approach, incentivate more recycling, and towards from where are we starting? Maybe doing some sort of starting survey within a delimited population to see that there is actually one change, something changing into the way, and that people are understanding what we're doing, or where they are getting it the way we think they are, because yeah, sometimes it cannot happen, which just happening now. I'm bringing something that is not being understood, so I need to rethink the way I'm doing it because we're having this feedback exercise.
I was just going to add something tiny to that. I think it's culture change we'd be measuring rather than behavior change. I think that would be the most helpful thing for us. But also, while I certainly found this hard to consider how we'd apply it, I think there are a few principles which are really helpful, and particularly the partnership pre-settled goals agreement. I think that kind of helps to set things out at the beginning of a project, but then, and probably using purpose context, but maybe just in a simpler way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that is really valuable, because if somehow you think that this might be helpful in further ways, we could carry on the thinking into how can this could eventually become something that represents you better on, and mostly you there's like the common denominator between the whole system level. So what is trying to find us like this missing link, and that will link the shape, but also with it being done in other areas. So that would be really great to get into the project. Thank you. And yeah, we're kind of we're almost there. Thank you. Maybe here, yes.
So I've been kind of battling with this for quite a long time. So I work for a funder for ESRC, and I can kind of see how this would work really nicely for projects. So the projects we fund, helping them move through a theory of change and actually attach some metrics to it. But I guess the issue on a system level is what ESRC is trying to do, and what we're all trying to do in the social science ecosystem is not necessarily just a case of adding all those things together. So you still have the kind of oranges and apples issue that you can't measure projects against each other, and you can't put that big number on what social science is doing on that big level. So I can see how it helps at a project level, but I just wondered what your thoughts are, because obviously in that comms one, they were doing something consistently again across all comms campaigns, and I really struggle with what that could look like for social science, because it's so diverse what people are trying to do. And it's just not a matter of having this from every project. We just have loads of data then, but no way of collating it in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. That is something that it is important mostly to bear in mind. If I had more time, normally these presentations was with a big introduction of a caveat of the unintended effects of metrics, which are the gaming effects, but also the commiseration process. The commiseration in which we homologate qualities in quantities. In the moment that we translate that into the categories, we put our own personal charge of what those categories mean, and so the thing gets translated. So that is a factual effect of categories and metrics. What we might sometimes go overseen is that actually this process happens everywhere. For some reasons, in the social sciences, we are much more reluctant. But when you have the classification standards, the repositories, it happens the same. In big data happens the same, and there is a lot of just because of the classification. So this is an effect that we need to be very careful about that. But yes, it's a decision to make. Do we want metrics? Do we want metrics to prove, or do you? Is there a choice? Is there a need of metrics to justify resource allocation? Or you decide not playing that game? I don't know if you like to make that choice. I don't know. But yeah, it's a decision. It's a process that that happens when it's. Jenny, do you want to say something? I thought that you.
I was just agreeing how.
Yeah. Yes, and I totally agree with that one too. And there is often we have endless discussions with Thomas about the need to actually, we need to bring this because we are in a very particular level. But how can we actually try to find visibility at the system levels that it makes it more like not apples and oranges, but fruits? So what will be that fruit category? But in order to get to that fruit category, I'd really like to know how to have more visibility of the variety of individual fruits, as bad as it can come to. So I might not have all the different types of orange, or I don't know, Mexican orange, Colombian orange, or whatever. Maybe I won't have that. I will just have orange, but at least I have orange. So, and at the end I will have fruits. And I'm sorry because I'm really running out of time. I'm very grateful for your patience. I don't know if in this table you would like to share something.
Valeria, I think we will have to stop it there because there's like 5 minutes until the next session.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Thank you to Gul, Jenny, Arnie, Neil behind at the UCI team for the putting together, organizing this workshop. And I'll be around for whatever questions or comments that you'd like to share. Thank you.